Hi, good evening. So as I said, my name's Professor John Tregoning. Thank you for joining me tonight as I walk through my midlife crisis. Hopefully, a public act of catharsis, hopefully that's a bit more informative than me buying leather trousers and a motorbike. Before we get into it, I really want to thank the Royal Institution for having me here. Thank Chris and Jason and Mike and Jesus, who's helped set it all up. I've been coming to the Royal Institution for 35 years. One of the things of teaching at university is you normally say 35 years, and you look at the audience and you think, oh, wow, none of you are alive then. Here, I feel more comfortable than that. So, let's get into the talk. Spoiler alert, the answer to the question posed by my book title, Live Forever, is that no, we can't live forever. Everyone dies. Because you see, time wants you dead. Not just you, but everyone you've ever met. It wants your heart to stop and your lungs to fail. It wants your muscles to twinge and bones to ache. It wants your mind to dwindle, your brain to wane, and you to fade from the world, your only traces residing in the memories of others. Trust me, this gets funnier. The good news is that thanks to vaccines and clean water, you and I have survived childhood and can look forward to a much longer life expectancy than our forebears. Had I been born in 1860, like my great-great-grandfather, imaginatively also called John Tregoning, I most likely wouldn't be alive to give this talk. In fact, I should have died 9 months ago. And if you want to understand how these advances have extended our lives, you can read my first book, Infectious, which you can see comes highly endorsed by great quote goes here. In a long tradition of academic photos, Dorian Gray-like, no longer reflecting what the actual person looks like, this is my work swipe card. And this is how I still imagine myself, somewhere in my mid-20s. But the clues started building up that I am, in fact, aging. I now have to hold my phone somewhere in the first row of the audience to read the text messages from my children telling me how old I am. And also, when I went to the hairdresser the other day, the blonde hair that I imagined piled up in my lap as increasingly grey. So I drew on my 25 years of experience to find out why we age, what we die of, and what, if anything, we can do about it. But for some of the more interesting things, I've decided to do some experiments on myself as a way to illustrate them. Admittedly, my N=1 studies are not exactly science. This has a long and inglorious history. Some of you may recognize this. This is a classic ignoble study. So this was Michael Smith, who allowed a bee to sting himself daily on different body parts in order to produce a pain index. Unsurprisingly, he showed that being stung on the shaft of the penis was the most painful. And I thought I'd start, oh no, the bees have escaped. Phew. So, for my first trick, we won't do the bees. So the first thing is measuring my heart rate. So through the miracles of modern technology, we can suddenly flip to what my heart rate is doing right now. And it's quite high. So my resting heart rate is normally 50. So I'm basically running a marathon right now. The second thing I'm going to do, he says, so the thing that Faraday never had to worry about when he was at the Royal Institution was how many times he was going to swear, not water on his laptop, and generally mess things up. Okay, so this is a glucose monitor. I'm going to pop it under here so you can see it. If we swap to that little camera. And I'm now going to stab myself and not scream out in pain and try not to swear. So what I'm going to do is measure my blood glucose. Oh, prime it. Hang on. Seamless, right? It wouldn't be so... Oh, bollocks, I did it. All right, there we go. That was number 1, but I whispered it, so it doesn't count. Oh, I did it. Oh, there we go. Oh, I rehearsed it earlier. Okay, so now, I'm now bleeding for the sake of science. And what we're going to do is put that in there. Oh, no. Okay, so what we can see is my starting glucose level, which is quite high. Dear, my dad's going to be looking at Alskins. And then comes the fun part. So who likes caramel wafers? Okay, hands up. We've got caramel wafers for quite a few of you. I need one, so I'm going to hand out a few to this side. If you want to pass them back, Georgie, you can have one. We've got some on this side. This is just to get away with the fact that I've got to eat a caramel wafer. And we've got some caramel wafers there. Give one to Rishi. Caramel wafer. Thank you. And pass those back. Do you want to throw one behind you? And then, right. So we're all going to go, those of you who are lucky enough to have a caramel wafer are about to go on a journey of sugar discovery. Talk amongst yourselves. I didn't rehearse this bit. I can feel the disgust from my mother in the back. Okay. So, in 15 minutes, we will see what just happened to my blood sugar with that caramel wafer. So if we pop back to the slides. These are the UK's biggest killers. And we can see the impact. So what's really striking about this data is if you look, so on the left-hand side, we've got men. On the right-hand side, we've got women. And you can see the big block of green. And the axes along the top is like the decade and then the age of people down the side. And you can see that massive block of green that used to kill people. That's all the infectious diseases which are now being resolved through vaccines and clean water. And it moves into heart attacks. And this is this sort of zero-sum model. So everyone's going to die. So there has to be a most common cause of death. And as we get better at preventing and treating heart attacks, we then start getting more people dying of cancer. So this changes. And I think this is a really interesting data set, but it didn't help me understand what I was going to die of. So I turned to my family history. And there's lots of chat about longevity running in families. Well, nearly every family will tell you a great aunt who lived to 110, eating nothing but fish and chips and smoking 50 cigarettes a day. It's quite selective, and it's a really good example of confirmation bias. If they did it, so can I. A better way to explore the hereditary aspect is through genetics, which is fascinating but extremely complex. And one of the first rules of biology, or idea of biology I've come to appreciate recently, is that if you think you understand biology, you don't understand biology. It is so complicated. In my exploration of genetics, I learned two things. Firstly, if you can trace your direct line of ancestry to a specific person, after 10 generations, you might share no genes at all, even if they're all called John. So if you look at my family, it goes, imaginatively, John, Henry, John, Cecil, David, Richard, John. It's possible I share no genes at all with that John, even though I can trace a direct line of hereditary through it. The other one, which is more mind-blowing, is that due to random assortment of parental chromosomes, two siblings can share from 0 to 100% genes. So you can be an identical asynchronous twin. So you can actually have two people born who are exactly the same, but at separate times. Our genes definitely influence our health, sometimes in a very direct way, like the risk of Huntington's, but sometimes nudging our risk. So I used genetics to understand if I had any red flags. And so this is where we're going to have a look at how gene sequencing has moved. So some of you who've worked in a lab may recognize this. This is called a gel electrophoresis tank. And what we used to do is not put the slide in. What we used to do, let's still do that, is we basically used to separate DNA using chromatography. You could split it by the size of the DNA. And it was long and it was slow. And if you wanted anything sequenced, when I was doing my PhD, you used to have to send it in the post to another lab, and about 3 weeks later, it would return back to your lab. Things have moved on. So this is the lab in a bag. I'm going to hold it up. This is developed by my colleague, Jesus Rodriguez. And this is very cool. For those of you who've ever worked in a lab science, you'll be astounded. So, you'll recognize one of these. This is the sampler that goes up your nose. So it's like the dreaded COVID test. So you take a sample from that, you take your genetics, and then, if we jump 2 slides ahead. So this is what we used to do for gels. So each of these bands was a letter. But now we can take our genetic material and we put it into this clever little device. These 3 tubes, which I will put just here, these 3 tubes can extract DNA from a sample in your nose into a thing that you can run in 90 seconds. It's extraordinary. So this is how it works. It's got a clever magnet. I'm going to do complete injustice to the technology. But the magnets stick to the cells, and then this is one I did earlier. Jesus did earlier. And so the cells stick to the magnet, and it basically, at each step, it sticks to the bit that you want. And then you can see it swirling down and just like sticking to the magnet, and then you transfer that. That wasn't me, that was good. You transfer that to a different tube, and then you just move on and on through the system. And what that means is that you can go from your sample, so from your nose to your DNA or your RNA in 90 seconds. You then pipette it into this little machine, and this is single temperature machine, which runs for 30 minutes, and it then gives you an answer. So the one we did earlier, and it gives you a colorimetric answer. Sorry, I can't, if you can all see that, you can see there are pink tubes and yellow tubes. And now we can do our genetics from our nose into the answer in 35 minutes, which is incredibly fast. So you could use that for human genetics, you can use it for diagnostics, you can use it for diseases in labs. There's a whole range of things, and that's the speed of the process of development. One of the brilliant things I think about working in science is working with amazing people who develop extraordinary things. So I think we should all give Jesus a round of applause. I might get him to stand up. Yeah, go for that. He's there. So, I set out to do a bit of genetics on myself. And there's lots of other ways that are easily accessible to consumers. You can spit into a pot and send it off to a direct-to-consumer organization. You have to spit 5 mils of spit, which is quite a lot of spit, as I discovered. I also discovered it was real science, because the first time I did it, I sent them the wrong kind of spit or something, and it failed. And if you're a scientist, you'll know that things always fail first time. They particularly fail first time if you're answering the comments of the review that you've only got 10 minutes left to do. Second and unlucky, I discovered all sorts of things which I could easily have discovered using my finger and my taste buds. So I discovered that my earwax is sticky. I also found it tastes kind of gross. This wasn't in the survey, but I left no stone unturned in my quest for the truth. This information, however, got me no further in understanding what I might die of. So instead, I went back to imagining the whole UK as me, which I imagine what most people do. Part of the problem is we're so complicated. The other part is our maths aren't really designed to cope with this complexity. Medicine is predominantly about statistics. If we look at this audience of 200 people, you could say roughly, if you all smoked, you could say about 95% of you would drop dead of smoking, but 5% of you survive. But we couldn't go around the audience and say, you'll be the lucky or unlucky 5. And so if we imagine the UK as all me, I can get some relatively high-level data about what we might die of. It might be dementia or heart attacks. If we now split it down into a smaller population, say just the men, it's a slightly different risk. So I can now say the highest risk is heart attacks. And you can get more and more detailed. You can look at this for me now represents the UK who are white male in their 40s. So it gives a better risk profile. But I'm beginning to lose that kind of individual understanding. And in the end, each of us is very individual. Our exposure, our risk, that it becomes kind of really impossible to predict anything with any degree of success. And the stats don't really help us. And actually, at the moment, AI, I don't think, will help either. It suffers from the rubbish in, rubbish out, as much as it does from not understanding the question in the first place. So the computer can tell us the answer is 42, but if we don't know the question, we're never going to be able to understand what's going on. So we have to go back to these high-level stats. And so this is the UK data. So again, we've got men on the left, women on the right. And you can see the major things that people will die of are Alzheimer's, heart disease, stroke, lung disease, and cancer. And so for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about these different areas of risk and try to understand it. So if we just pop, we're going to start with the heart, because that's my highest risk. And if we just pop back to my heart, let's see if I've calmed down. Oh, not bad, actually. I'm calmer. It was about 180 when I was out in the corridor, so we're getting closer. Death from heart attack is still the #1 risk for men my age. The heart doesn't look like this. It looks like this. And this was all the drawings were done by a brilliant colleague called Ash Irachetu, who did all the drawings for this book and Infectious. And it has one function, moving blood around the body, having filled it with oxygen. We have a 4-chamber deluxe model, but there are other variants. One of the facts that I learned during researching the book is that horses have extra hooves or extra hearts in their hooves. So horses don't have calf muscle. They have no muscle below their knee. And to return the blood, they have a soft patch in their hoof, which is called the frog, and that pushes the blood back around their body. And so they actually have 6 hearts. And they also lack calf muscles, because they're not cows. It says, pause till they laugh. The heart is singularly important. If it stops, blood does not go to our brains and we die, which means we need to keep our hearts working. And there are 2 major ways in which the heart stops beating: heart attacks and heart failure, which do sound confusingly similar. Heart attacks are where the blood supply to the heart stops. The muscle itself stops pumping. The heart is a muscle. If you imagine it's pumping all the time, if you do this, if you just squeeze a tennis ball for 60 times a minute, your arm would get quite tired. Imagine doing that now for the rest of your life. That's what your heart is doing. The other type is heart failure, which is where the muscle kind of wanes. It stops being as good and the ability to pump the blood around. We are much better at preventing heart disease and fixing it when it goes wrong. And this is an image from Christian... This is not an image from Christian Barnard. This is an image from Christian Barnard, the first heart surgeon. The reason the first heart surgery was done in South Africa was to do with rules about death. So in the US, death was defined as cessation of the heart, whereas in South Africa, it was cessation of the brain. And if it was cessation of the heart, you couldn't transplant one heart to another person because the heart would be dead. So it was only when people were brain dead they were able to transplant between people. But to be honest, having somebody crack open my chest and putting a brand new heart is not that appealing. One of the simplest ways to avoid heart attacks is through exercise. And exercise has a range of benefits, which helps the heart indirectly. It reduces weight, it modifies inflammation, it improves the efficiency of the muscles to get oxygen, it returns blood from the extremities, it increases cellular repair, burns glucose, and reduces cortisol. And because everything's interrelated, exercise reduces diabetes, stroke, cancer, even improves mental health. So when it comes to improving life outcomes, exercise trumps almost everything else I tried during the book. And my personal preference is for running, and this is me running in the Tuscan Hills, which does seem like a bit of a brag. But thanks to exercise trackers, I can now see how much my speed is waning. So this is me, 2014, think I was doing okay, same run, 7 years later, I'm now considerably slower. So the pride definitely comes before the fall. So what we're going to do now is get everyone to get their hearts running. So I want everyone to jog on the spot. So actually, if we put my heart back up again, so we're okay. I'm going to jog on the spot. You're going to jog where you're sitting, just so you can all enjoy the feeling of your heart going faster. Ready? So we'll do 5 seconds of that. Go. You're not running. Go. Give up. Knees up. Knees up. Is it changing? Yeah. Hey, it's cool. Right. If you do exercise, your heart goes faster. Who knew? So I'm now going to see what happened with the sugar. So having got all that energy from my caramel wafer, which I spat all over Michael Faraday's desk. Sorry, Michael. I'm now going to try and make this work again. Okay, here we go. Oh, no. Good beat, bad beat. E3. Do we think that's a good E3 or a bad E3? So, you put it in the wrong way. Okay. Oh, does that mean I've got to stand myself again? Oh, for heaven's sake. I can see why people who have to test all the time don't test. Okay. All right. Somebody should invent a continuous monitor of these. They'd make a fortune. Oh, my gosh. Okay, here we go. Don't be E3. Okay, it was 8.1 before. What do we reckon? Oh, it's gone down. Damn it. Science is rubbish. For those of you who are planning careers in the audience, don't choose science. Okay, so in theory, maybe it's because I was running so much, it just went down. It probably means I'm not going to bother doing the 3rd time, because who knows what will happen. Okay, fine. Sugar should make your heart... Okay, heart went up. Okay, so, having recovered from that amazing experiment, don't worry, there's more to come. So second in the general list of killers, but topping my own personal harbinger of doom is stroke. And this is generally caused by high blood pressure. Stroke and heart disease are intertwined because of the central role of the heart's output of the blood. The blood vessels serve as the motorways, trunk roads, and tiny country lanes of our body. Blood itself makes up the traffic that passes down these fleshy highways. Blood's main cargo is oxygen, but it also delivers sugar and nutrients from the guts to everywhere else and removes the waste products via the liver and kidneys. Our blood vessels also carry the body's emergency system, the immune cells, to the sites of infection. And finally, blood contains an inbuilt motorway repair system, clotting, which plugs any leaks. However, clotting can also cause major problems by disrupting flow, not dissimilar to roadworks. Misplaced clots cause a quarter of all deaths. They contribute to coronary heart disease, so stopping the heart from beating itself, but they also cause strokes, which is disruption of the blood flow to the brain, and that causes rapid and incalculable damage. And one of the highest risk factors for stroke is blood pressure. Basically, the vessels are under more stress, so they either burst, causing bleeding kinds of strokes, or they clot, causing the blocking kind. You can, like me, get your blood pressure read at your nearest GP. The problem with doing this is doing it itself drives up your blood pressure. There's a thing called white coat syndrome. Just the idea of turning up to the doctors makes your blood pressure go higher. I reckon doing it in front of a live audience is definitely going to help. Before I get a complete nagging, it is better than it appeared in the first place. So I was unhappy with the first result, which was a bit on the high side, so we went to a different surgery to retest it. This was better, but not good, so I took the tried and tested method of measuring it again until I got the number I wanted. There we go, third time lucky. Okay, so I'm now going to live measure my blood pressure. I hate this. Those of you who have to do this regularly, the whirring noise is like Pavlovian. Just like, oh, it's going to be really high. Okay, so if we put this on here, this is it's a blood pressure measure, and it's going to give me two numbers. It's going to squash my arm really uncomfortably. I'm just going to hold my breath a bit so it doesn't do it too badly. I titled this slide Performance Anxiety. just to take my mind off how awful this is going to be. Okay, so it's now squeezing my arm quite hard, and basically it's listening for the sounds. As it cuts off the blood flow, that shouldn't be that high. I think I've done this wrong. Should we just do stop here? I thought the stabbing was going to be the worst, but I was really wrong. Anyhow, it works on sounds. It's waiting for the sound to disappear in my arm, which is the higher number, and then when it comes back again, that's the lower number, he says, looking at the doctor in the audience. That's about right, isn't it? Yeah, that's not right. I'm not. We'll just put this here and say that's broken. It was lower earlier. No. I reckon it was that half caramel wafer that's done that. Okay. Has anyone seen where I've put the remote control? Good. Okay. So that was another great demonstration. I reckon we're doing well so far. I've got 2 more to go. So fine. Good. Okay. So one of the things that widely touted as a way as a cure-all is cold water swimming, which, like many of the proposed longevity hacks, has a bit of a cult following, as I discovered making flippant comments about it to my younger sister. I threw myself into this, literally, and over the course of the week, I did notice a marked improvement of my tolerance of the English Channel, but mostly because I wore a better wetsuit and the weather improved. Having warmed up after my last dip, I evaluated the research surrounding sea swimming. Unfortunately, it's just as likely to kill you by drowning, hypothermia, or cardiac arrest as it is to extend your life. The modest health benefits of immersing yourself in freezing water on a January morning derive from being in beautiful places, doing exercise with like-minded people. And I'll loop back to it. There are benefits, and I'll come back to those. I'm not saying don't do it, just be aware it isn't a panacea, especially given the state of our water systems. One thing for certain about cold water, the first plunge into icy depths will take your breath away. Come on, that was another one. Oh, really? That deserved a titter at least. Unfortunately, many other things may do the same, contributing to the next cause of death, lung failure. We need our lungs to extract oxygen from the air around us and to burn the sugar our brains need. And now for some interactive science. Can everyone take in as deep a breath as possible? and then time how long you can hold it for. The average is somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds. The record is a remarkable 24 minutes and 37 seconds, held by a Croatian free diver, which is approximately how long I've been speaking for so far. You can let your breath go if you want. Interestingly, the longest recorded breath hold on a movie set was by Kate Winslet, which is a shame it wasn't Leo, because he might have lasted longer when she pushed him off the door, which clearly could have fit 2 people. As with everything in my body, my lungs are slowly getting worse. And unlike other systems where I just go on aches, pains, and vibe, I have longitudinal evidence to this fact. This is lung data, which is recorded as part of occupational screening at work. Lung measurements have a very long history. John Hutchison in the 1830s measured whether or not people had TB and collected data on over 4,000 subjects, including sailors, firefighters, policemen, paupers, artisans, soldiers, printers, draymen, pugilists and wrestlers, giants and dwarfs, gentlemen, girls, and disease cases. I normally put in a local joke here, but I can't quite work out who to slag off best. It'd normally be somewhere like UCL or something. Admittedly, I am none of them, but as you can see, the decline over the year, there was a relatively sharp decline over the years, with quite a big jump between 2010 and 2015. Given it was over a decade ago, and I can barely remember what I was saying at the beginning of this talk, I'm not sure what happened. I do know that in that time, I changed jobs, I moved out of London, and the Tories came to power, and I know who I'm blaming. Okay, experiment number 3. I know I'm bad at this one. So we're onto the on-desk thing, camera, that's the word we're looking for. If we just show the lung, so this is now the lung function measurement. So I want everyone to take that big breath in again, and do 4, this is brilliant, hopefully nobody's got COVID, and then blow out as hard as you can, and I'll do the same. And I now can tell you the number is somewhere between 400 and 500. I just sounded like Thomas the Tank Engine on his post-Beecham day. But there is a way, these are useful for doctors to measure the flow and the way the lung's working. If we go back to the slides, yep, brilliant. One of the most common forms of cancer, which is the next form of death I deal with, is found in the lung. And all the diseases, we fear cancer the most. A survey conducted in the US in 2000 reported that 48% of respondents dreaded it more than any other disease. And a staggering number of people get cancer. In 2020, nearly 300,000 new cancer diagnoses were made in the UK. Starker stat is that 50% of people in the UK will have some form of cancer diagnosis in their life, which is half the people in this room. But many of these people live out their lives and die of other things. If it's caught early, cancer is often treatable. And this is a really important message, is that get tested early. When it's caught early, you can get it treated. But when people are worrying about it as being an untreatable disease, they then go into this Schrödinger state of not wanting to know whether they've got it or they've not. And then you postpone testing, and then you're more likely to get more sick. My own experience, I had a melanoma on my neck about 15 years ago, and I'd spent too long ignoring it rather than getting it dealt with. I was lucky that we caught it early enough, but that stressful period of not knowing was very difficult. So my advice is, do go and get tested. The good news, it hadn't spread, and in my case, the cause was most probably the sun. But there's a complex list of cancer causes, or at least things that increase risk. Some of the things that are reported to cause cancer include bras, broken hearts, having children, not having children, crayons, being left-handed, Worcester sauce, being a man, and being a woman. Basically, this reflects the fact that 50% of people will get cancer. All of these things are associated with it. So don't, when you read these things in popular press, do take them with a pinch of salt. The WHO lists 1,100 different cancer-causing agents. It categorizes them from the most serious, carcinogenic to humans, which is group 1, through to probably or possibly carcinogenic to humans, which is group 2B. Bear in mind, these groups don't necessarily reflect the dose required. Plutonium and bacon both belong to group 1, but clearly you'd need to eat a lot more bacon than plutonium to get cancer. And one of the disappointing discoveries was that eating too much red meat increases gut cancer risk, and the safe limit for red meat is disappointingly low. It's 70 grams of red meat a day. For reference, a full English breakfast contains at least 150 grams of red meat. A full Scottish breakfast, probably slightly less, because whatever square sausage and white pudding are, they aren't actually meat. However, this is my favourite bit, sausages tenuously have a link to curing cancer. And stand by because there are some banger puns coming. Rudolf Virchow, who was a German scientist, was the first to point out that cancer was caused by misfunctioning cells. He also holds the remarkable record of being the only person to challenge somebody to a sausage duel. The Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Virchow got the choice of weapons, and he offered Bismarck either a pork sausage or one infected with a parasite called trichinella. Not wanting to come off versed for wear, Bismarck unsurprisingly backed out, and Virchow was declared the wiener. I still haven't quite landed this bridge from sausage jokes into quite serious subjects, so deep breath. We move on to the next organ of risk, the brain. I can't begin to scratch the complexity of the brain's working. What's remarkable is when you consider it's 75% water, which means that maybe the homeopaths are right. Water can have memory too. They aren't. I love the thwarted circularity of how we can use our brain to think about how our brain thinks without really understanding how it thinks. That it's so complex means there's lots of different ways that the brain can go wrong. The most striking is dementia. Dementia is the big umbrella term, and Alzheimer's is a subset within that. So you may hear the words used interchangeably, but Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There are the other types. It is characterized sometimes as a disease of not remembering, but dementia probably kills you because your bits of your brain that tell you to breathe or your heart to function stop working. So it's not necessarily about the loss of cognition, it's about the loss of function. And one of the things that accelerates this decline is blows to the head. So what this is showing is that up to about 25, you make lots of connectivity in your brain. And actually, one of the protective factors is higher education, which is why you should send all your children to university, particularly Imperial, and pay more fees. It then declines at a fairly linear rate. But if you have traumatic brain injury, it jumps down and then returns to that same limit. So that's why the kind of big blows to the head are problematic. I think there's more discussion is certainly needed around sport. Heading footballs, getting punched in the head and being crunched by a 20-stone prop are all going to do substantial damage, but there's the balance of the benefit of sport as well. Is there anything else we can do other than not being punched in the head? Let's look at three things. One that probably doesn't work, one probably does, and one that definitely does. The probably doesn't is brain training games. So sadly, beating me at Wordle this morning, which I can't remember what it was, but I got it in 4. So you might have beat me, you're still going to get dementia. The BBC show, Bang Goes the Theory, ran a really large study with 11,000 people doing brain training apps. And what they showed is over a month, people got much better at that brain training app, but there was no transferable ability to other things. So play games, yes, because it's fun, but it doesn't improve your brain power. This probably does is sleep, though nobody knows how. Even the experts have no idea why we sleep. I spoke to a colleague, Bill Wisdom, who's an FRS who works at Imperial, and I asked him why we sleep, and he's like, we don't know yet. Disrupting sleep is bad for you, so night shifts are particularly bad, and that has a range of bad outcomes. But there's no real consensus on how much we need. There was a study looking at civil servants in the 80s, and it suggested that less than 6 hours sleep a night increased the risk of dementia, but it didn't take much to reduce that risk down. 7 hours was probably okay. So sleep, yes. Don't fret about not being able to sleep. I think actually lots of people have different sleeping patterns, and we're not all the same. So it's not something I would spend too much time staying awake over. That definitely does is really simple. If you're beginning to encounter age-relating hearing loss, get hearing aids. Reconnecting to people through hearing aids reconnects you socially and actually is protective against dementia. So go early on the hearing aids. It's really important. It actually has a genuinely protective effect. Where are we? We are now up to poor outcomes. Yes, good. Another biological function related to poor health is eating. This is and isn't complicated. On the simple linear risk side, carrying excess weight carries an increased risk of mortality across a range of disease types, but most strikingly, it can cause type 2 diabetes. And this is where the cells that should be making and releasing insulin to control our blood sugar fail to do so. Increased blood sugar has a range of different problems, but mostly it destroys the tiny vessels at the extremities, particularly at the fingers, the toes, and in the eyes. And in the end, the simple science is if you have calorific intake that exceeds output, you will put on weight. But it doesn't speak to compliance and the complex interplay of food, self, and health. I am going to try it just out of curiosity to see if my blood has either gone up or down. In theory, it was meant to go up for 15 minutes and then down again. Anyone want to take a bet? Do we think up or down? This is like Panto. This is great. Science, Panto. Up. Okay, we're going to go up or down? I heard up. Oh, my poor thumb. I'm getting good at this, though. Okay, here we go. The big countdown. Ooh. Oh. It's possible that these machines aren't that accurate. He says, but those of you who use them all the time, you should definitely use them. Okay, so what was meant to have happened was that it started at about 6, it should have got up to about 10 and then come back down again. I think maybe because I only had half a bar. Maybe. Control. Okay, so can I do anything about my diet? Much has been written about the benefits of starving yourself. So in the name of science, I set out to do this. Hence, for a week in September last year, and quite without the support of my wife, my family, or my work colleagues, I started a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. And although calories can be cheap, a premium calorie-restrictive diet can be incredibly expensive. The one I chose gave me less than 900 calories a day, and the 5 days' worth of food cost a staggering £160. I could have bought 80,000 of those delicious caramel wafers. No, 80,000 calories, that would be even more. 80,000 calories of caramel wafers, which would have been enough to feed the whole crowd for that. Instead, I found myself in receipt of 5 delicious days of diet plan. And if you want to imagine my experience, think of Eric Carle's The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Every day, I ate 2 cup of soups until Saturday when I ate a full English breakfast, a huge plate of pasta, a curry, and drank 4 pints of lager. The question being, did I turn into a beautiful butterfly? In terms of physical effects, I lost 2.5 kilos in a belt size, so swings and roundabouts, but it came at a real cost. I measured the effect on my mental state, and this was using fairly standard, these are kind of fairly standard, quite simple apps. And what you can see here is a number of different things. First of all, this was the Sunday night before it started. I had quite a lot of anxiety because I thought it was going to be absolutely terrible. My wife, who's here, attested that I was too weak and tired to make a menace of myself, and she actually thought it was a good thing. I was quite miserable on the first day, my happiness dipping. I was more miserable on the 3rd day, and even more miserable by the 5th day. And it emphasized the role that food plays in my life. I spend a lot of time cooking, thinking about what I'm cooking, eating food with friends, lunch breaks, meal times at work. They're all really important, and all of that during my diet week, it disappeared, leaving me feeling quite empty. So that wasn't for me. And I think the thing about these different fasting diets is they are different ways of doing calorific control. And a lot of it's about compliance. So some people may find 5-2 is easy. Some people may find doing no breakfast is easy. But mostly it's about not eating less. Can we be more sophisticated than starving ourselves? The microbes that live in and on us are collectively known as the microbiome. Estimates vary, but there are at least as many bacteria on and in you as there are cells that make up you. The extent of the complexity of our microbiome means it plays an important role in our health and disease. However, it's much harder to put down. When I was speaking about human genetics, we have 19,000-ish genes, and we don't really know what they all do. The microbiome has 200 million genes. That's 5 orders of magnitude more complicated. And so trying to apply that and trying to understand what that's doing is really difficult. And to add a final layer of complexity, it changes constantly. You can change your gut microbiome just by eating different foods. And I set out to explore this with 2 interventions. The fun one, eating curry, drinking lager, and the sensible one of fiber and fermented food. Don't worry, the next experiment I'm not going to do on the stage. To make it more sciencey, I've done a materials and methods. So this is gut microbiome, so I had to collect poo. And the process ended up being a bit traumatic. Because of train strikes, I couldn't get to work on day 1. So I had to collect my sample at home. To do this, I unpacked my Daclapac Feco container, which is basically a potty that sits on the toilet, and commenced a game of battle shits. Attempt 1, failed. I missed. Poo in the toilet, no poo in the sampler. Attempt 2, near miss. Attempt 3, nailed it. prompting the next question: what do I do with the sample until I get it to the lab next day? Answer: home freezer. Double bagged, of course. I'm not a monster. Opinions varied on that point. However, I then had to transport it to work, which involved a freezer box, a highly technical Lidl bag, and remembering not to put it next to the heater on the train on the way in. Step 2, I was now a pro at sampling. I went at work, though I felt slightly embarrassed walking through the lab carrying a big blue potty. I hid both of them in the -80 at the back of work and wrote John's poo on it, just in case somebody wanted to do some actual science on it. Finally, I then handed it off to a colleague at St Mary's, who then did the sequencing for me on a slightly more complex machine. So what did I learn? First observation, it's quite difficult to eat the recommended amount of fibre. So you're meant to eat 30 grams of fibre a day. That is a lot of fibre. It was 2 baked potatoes, a lot of beans, and then force-feeding myself brown, horrible cereal stuff. Interestingly, the second experience, I experienced no gut symptoms from the high-fibre fermented food, so maybe the fermented food was something. I set out to find a way to record this. I chose a 42-point intestinal survey, but question 2 asked if farting had ever affected my cognitive function. I decided it was probably a bit too detailed and that maybe the diet reached that point, I ought to stop. And then what about the microbes? So what we're seeing here, these are the 3 different things. So this is my normal diet. This is me after eating curry and lager. And then this is me on the high-fiber diet. This is just the 3 most prominent bacteria that could be found in the sequence. And what you can see is actually, one day of change didn't really do anything. There's no difference between the 2 groups. But the 2 weeks of fiber completely eradicated some of the species. And if you care to if you believe some of the stuff about which bacteria are good, apparently this one is a good one you should have, and I basically killed it with kimchi. So my conclusion is this. This is obviously not a sensible conclusion. There are too many confounding factors. Each tooth has a unique microbiome. Each hair follicle has a unique microbiome. Even within a fecal sample, you'll have different bacteria on the outside than on the inside, and they also don't only reflect the lower intestine. It's really, really complicated. Save yourself £300, don't have a single stool sample sequenced. The final organs I'm going to talk about are also a bit toilet-related, the liver and the kidneys. Both fail us, and lots of people live with kidney and liver disease. They filter out stuff from the body and recycle water back, and we consume quite a lot of poison each day. The kidneys do filter out 20 times of our bodily fluid. And for one great piece of news for grumpy Gen Xers like myself, the required amount of water a day is probably less than recommended. You don't need 8 pints of water in a massive water bottle. You can probably just get away with a few cups of tea and a pint of beer. Alcohol and its negative effects on the body were not something I wanted to look at, as I didn't really want to find out how bad it is. The most alluring piece of data is that the very modest alcohol intake, this is this kind of graph here, modest alcohol take may improve all-cause mortality. And I spoke to Professor David Nutt about this. He's an expert in alcohol, drugs, and toxicology. And he said red wine definitely improves your quality of life if you drink it watching the sunset in Provence. Alcohol is a poison. The more you drink, the more damage you do. As a nation, we should drink less. You have to be aware you're making a choice. There is no safe limit of alcohol. If you drink it, go ahead and drink it, but be aware it's going to be causing you damage. And that's something we just need to take into it like a risk calculus. After all this intense research and self-experimentation, what did I learn? There are no surprises, and here's some public health information from Viz Comic. Do exercise, eat healthily, don't drink alcohol, don't smoke. If you stick to these 4 things, you'll extend your health span. Which may lead you to say, but I already knew that, and I've just paid £10 to come watch John talk about it. Or more, don't know. One of the things that occurred to me after submitting the final draft was one of the simplest ways to extend your life, and this probably should have occurred to me earlier. Get vaccinated. My job title has vaccine in it, so it was a bit dumb of me, and my wife is the head of vaccines, so all well done. But get vaccinated doesn't only stop you dying of the infection itself, it stops long-course sequelae. So what this infographic is showing, people who have severe influenza infection have a 45% higher chance of heart disease the following year after. So it's not just the disease itself, it's the sequelae, it's the long flu, long COVID, long RSV. Viral infections of the lung are really bad for you. So where you can get vaccines, do go ahead and get them. And that also includes things like HPV vaccines to prevent cervical cancer. So vaccination is really important. Is there anything else? One of the more extreme suggestions is castration. The impact of castration on the signs of aging has long been noted. Hippocrates observed that eunuchs are not subject to gout, nor do they become bald. And a retrospective study of Korean genealogical records identified that eunuchs live about 14 years longer than their socially economic but fully intact peers. Unfortunately, well, I guess not unfortunately, fortunately, retrospective biological studies drawn from slightly ropey ancient sources come with some limitations, not least the accuracy of recording dates of birth and death. If you do decide on this most extreme route, there may be a cosmetic benefit. In vital work, one research group explored the aesthetics of the scrotum, presenting the breakthrough conclusion. Ultimately, it was not possible to identify a beautiful scrotum. We must instead speak of the least ugly. Just in case it's not clear, don't try castration at home. Get a doctor to do it. No, kidding. There is another study about aging that has lots of traction. This is the idea of blue zones. And I think actually Chris was saying somebody's going to speak about this in a month's time, where people live longer and then extrapolating from those zones as a way to improve longevity. And some of the overlapping characteristics include moderate activity, social engagement, healthy eating. However, you could also view it as just the extremes of the bell curve. Everything humans do, there is people in the middle, there are people at one extreme, people at the other extreme. For every person in Okinawa living to 100, there's somebody living in Lesotho till they're 50. So it may just be statistics. Another thing that really occurred to me is that 90-year-olds in three of these zones, Okinawa, Italy, and Greece, would have been teenagers during the Second World War and have experienced extreme trauma. So Okinawa, for example, was flattened for about 6 months. And I don't think anyone's suggesting that as a way to improve life. And finally, a study from UCL actually showed that quite a lot of it was to do with retirement and pension fraud. So maybe this isn't the way we should go ahead. So where does this get us? I undertook a lot of experiments and spent a lot of time thinking about aging. Honestly, it was a bit of a bleak year, and then came the nadir at the beginning of the last academic year. Working at university, you get a fixed point from which you can feel yourself moving rapidly. Each intake of students, although they're the same age, appear a bit younger. And walking through the campus, the students are so full of energy and potential, all those branching paths that have now closed to me. Nothing brings the flush of youth back, and everything just hurts. It's enough to turn you to drink, and we know that doesn't help. It all felt quite bleak, but then I came across one more piece of advice that turned everything on its head. Connectivity helps us age better. Loneliness leads us to die quicker. To such an extent, the US Surgeon General declared loneliness to be as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day or drinking 6 alcoholic drinks a day. Social isolation increases the risk of all-cause mortality. Social connectivity increases your survival by 50%. And actually, lots of the things I look to lead to this point. The anti-aging effects of cold water swimming come because you're doing it with other people. If you can combine cognitive and social and physical elements in your activities, you're actually getting the best of all worlds. So going to a concert, singing along with friends, jumping up and down, that's actually good for you because you're connecting all these different aspects. Dancing. It's probably better to have a few ready meal or fast food meals than a lifetime of quinoa alone. So connectivity is really important. I started this journey seeing grey hairs in the mirror and worrying about my impending death. 1 year later, with considerably more grey hairs, did I learn everything. I thought my journey of discovery might change my diet or my exercise regime, and I did try to do this. Nothing ever stuck. What did change was I discovered a profound sense of gratitude for the time I spent with my friends and family, just being together. And I'd recommend you all do the same. So my final piece of advice is as follows. Do more of what you like with the people you love. And to that extent, I'm just going to take a photo of us all having fun together. If you could do the lights. Thank you very much.